Hello, you are listening to the Divorce University online podcast with your hosts, Thomas and Tammy Ferreira.
Hi, I'm Tammy.
And I'm Thomas.
And today we're talking about changing course in your case. And so, I think our most common example usually is around child custody issues. That's just kind of what we do the most of and have the most experience in. But, this will really apply no matter what kind of...
it could be anything.
Yeah, what kind of situation you're in. But
a lot of what applies in family law harkens back kind of the art of war. And in warfare, you have to be nimble. You have to be flexible. I follow as you know, and as many of our listeners know, I follow the Ukraine conflict very carefully. I read the update from the Institute for the Study of War every evening,
right?
Because I'm fascinated by it. and one of the things that I think is really interesting about the war is that the tactics and strategy of the Russian side has been utterly inflexible.
Right.
And so one of the advantages that the Ukrainians have always had in the conflict is that they're flexible. In other words, their chain of command, if the person that's down, the commander that's actually on the front in the battle, the lieutenant or whatever they call that person, the corporal or the person that's running the play on the ground, if they don't like the look of the defense, they can change the play.
Right.
Right. Whereas with Russia, it's all top down, from Vladimir Putin to his top generals to their underlings, and they are utterly inflexible. And what has happened is that they're using the same strategy over and over again, the same failed strategy, and expecting different results.
Right. Right. And especially when you're not the boots on the ground and you don't have the information of what's going on and all that kind of thing. And I think that how that relates to, the court cases is, first of all, obviously, doing the same thing in your court case and not understanding why you keep losing over and over and over and you're not getting anywhere. But also, I think that particularly for self-represented people, they also don't have any quote unquote boots on the ground in a way because they don't understand what's happening.
Yeah.
A lot of times when I see clients who are frustrated with the court, who don't understand feel like they're not heard, don't understand. They feel like there's some thing where the judge isn't listening or this type of stuff. And it's usually a matter of there's something happening in the context that you don't understand.
Right.
There's some procedural limits. There's something that you're not understanding.
Or you just got the black hat, but you don't know why.
Right. And you don't understand.
I see that happen all the time, where somebody goes into court and their whole presentation ticks off the judge.
Right.
But they don't know, because judges, most of them, play it pretty close to the vest.
Right.
So they're not going to come out and say, except in rare circumstances, well, that really ticks me off.
Right.
Well,
and they can't. If you think about it, they really can't, because they're a neutral. They can't appear,
right,
to be favoring one side over the other. And I think that's why they play it close to the vest, so that their own feelings aren't
right
shown or whatever, so that they can try to maintain their neutrality.
But a lot of reason why the self-representatives don't change their tactics is because they don't know what just happened.
Right. They don't know what just happened, and they have the wrong idea about what will fix it.
Right.
Because they think, you just had this in court this week where one of your clients had a bad outcome.
Right.
And you came out and you were trying to explain.
Something that rarely happens in my practice, right?
Right. But this particular case, the client, a lot of this goes back to the client's behavior and their own, and I think that was a lot of the situation in this case. But anyway, when it came out of court, you were trying to explain to the client, like, moving forward, what she needed to change based on the specific feedback you had gotten from the court in that particular
Right.
session and the court appearance, and what she interpreted that was her interpretation of what the court said is, well, I should have had more evidence.
Right. And what she needed to do was reverse her approach to this case, like 180 degrees.
Right.
And I tried to explain that to her, but she didn't really tumble to that. But I think one of the first things that you have to take away from, any time you lose a game, or, if you're a football player or you're a basketball player and you lose, you have to think about, why did I lose this game?
Right.
Okay. What could I have done differently? Did I play the wrong personnel? Did I run the wrong plays? What is it that led to this defeat?
Yeah. You don't go out the next week and play the exact same strategy against the exact same team.
Right. And
hoping it'll be different.
This time it'll be different. But that's what they do, isn't it?
Right.
They go out and they think, well, I gave them all I had last time, and but I didn't have enough video.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So, and she needed to do the opposite. But I think the first question you have to ask when you're facing a litigation situation, or even after you've lost, is, can the court really do what I want it to do?
Yeah, I say this. I'm pretty famous for this, and I'll kind of water it down a little. But I always say to my clients, if you are looking for an order from the court that keeps your ex from being a jerk, no such thing exists.
Right. Yeah, they can't really micromanage. It's kind of a big picture thing. Like in a restraining order, for example, the restraining order is either granted or denied.
Right.
There's no almost. There's
right.
no, the restraining order is denied, but I sure showed them what kind of person they were.
Right.
That doesn't
help.
It doesn't help you.
Yeah. And I was talking to somebody a few days ago who has, she's self-represented, and she has trial coming up on custody. And, I went through it there, and I said, look, you're not trying to prove that you're the better parent. That's not the issue. Like that's not the battle to fight, because you already have, the court doesn't have any concerns about your parenting. You have like 70% of the time.
Yeah.
So you don't really need to defend yourself on certain fronts and all that. You just have to address the things that are a concern for you.
Right.
In this case, in Dad's world. And so, I think people get really hung up on kind of trying to, especially in child custody, proving that they're the better parent. And that's not the criteria the court uses at all. And so that's why you're not getting the out, because you're looking for the court to go, okay, I find this parent is the better parent. You win, you get more parenting time. That's not even the framework. That's not even in the playbook, and so you have to get in the right game before you can even win it. And so a lot of times people aren't even playing the right game.
Right. And a lot of times the game you want to play is, how do I appear to support the other parent's parent-child relationship?
Right.
It's huge. And people say, well, I want to get in all these records and show that I'm just a better mom than he is a dad or whatever. But meanwhile, you're proving in your talking parents communication or your text messaging that it's really not about your child.
Right.
It looks from the record like it's about him or about her.
Right.
And that's, in my mind, the quickest way to get the black hat.
Right. And the problem is, in a custody case in particular, depending on how old your child is, you have a sentence until that child is 18, so if you're dealing with a 5-year-old, you got a 13-year sentence, you got a long way to go.
Right.
And so if you come out the gate and you've got the black hat, continuing to do the same thing you've been doing and hope that the courts are going to, quote unquote, recognize what is actually happening, or AKA what you think is actually happening, is not going to get you there. Once you hit that point where it didn't go well, you've got to shift, because there's some reason, usually in your own. 99 times out of 100, I would say the reason is in the person's own behavior,
right?
Of why the outcome happened.
That's absolutely true. And a lot of times what happens, you go to a request for order, and there's some big issue like a change of custody or a move away or something. And the court sets it for 10 months down the road, sets it for a full day hearing. And the client looks at me and says, "Oh my gosh, they just set it for a full day. They set this 8 months down the road. We're going to do till then." And I say, "I tell you what you're going to do. You're going to change your strategy.
Right.
You're going to change course right at that point, because that 8 months is an opportunity.
Right.
It's an opportunity to change the way you are."
Right.
Now, what are the court? What you have to think? What's the court concerned about here? Okay, number one, they're concerned about the child's safety.
Right.
Right.
That's probably the biggest thing.
That's the biggest thing. So if you don't have some kind of red flag issue like alcoholism or abuse or neglect, then that one's somewhat off the table.
Right.
But secondly, and if you read the La Mouche case, that's the move away case with the
For
8
California.
factors.
Mm-hmm.
And if you read that case, the court tells you, the appellate court tells you what we're looking for here.
Right.
And one of the huge things we're looking for is, does that other parent support what we call frequent and continuing contact with the non-moving parent? So the court says, okay, we're going to give you a move away if you can demonstrate to us that you would be the parent that would allow that long distance parenting plan to work.
Right. Right. Yeah. And it's so counterintuitive, because your tendency is to want to prove that the other parent isn't involved, or, those types of things, because you think that that's what will get you the move away. And actually it's kind of, the opposite strategy is what's true. Right.
So what the client wants to do is, oh gosh, we got 8 months. Let's get an investigator. Let's put out some surveillance. Let's dig into their background. Let's do discovery. Let's hit them over the head with everything we've got. And that's what you did at the last hearing.
Right.
That's what
and it didn't work.
And it didn't work. So what makes you think that's going to work this time?
Right. Yeah, and I have two things came to mind when you were talking a minute ago, and you said, if there's no safety concerns. And I think part of the problem with that is you have to look at this from, are there safety concerns from the court's perspective?
Right.
Because a lot of times what people are doing is they're saying, well, I know the other parent, and I know this is going to happen and that's going to happen. And you know, this, that, and the other thing are all going to happen.
Right. I'm afraid he's going to leave his marijuana out.
Yeah. Or I'm afraid she's, going to drive drunk with the kids, or I'm afraid, and honestly, until said thing happens, there's not a lot you can do. And people think, why do I have to wait till something bad happens? And I know that that's how it feels. But from the court's perspective, it's like, a lot of times people do change through a divorce or separation from the other parent. A lot of times they do get their crap together when they're left to be the only one there parenting the child. Also, if this person had this history and you stayed with them through all of that stuff, then the court kind of goes, obviously you weren't too concerned about it because you stayed in this relationship for 5 years.
Right. Yeah.
And you've had the baby around this person or the child around this person or whatever. And so the court, kind of gives everybody the benefit of the doubt at the start. And so when you're thinking about those safety concerns, you have to think about them from a court level. So you have concern about the alcohol. Well, if the other parent drinks alcohol 2 or 3 nights a week and drinks several drinks and, pretty frequently got intoxicated, then really what you're probably going to get is just an order that nobody use alcohol during the parenting time. And then you have to wait for that to see if that person complies or doesn't comply or
Right.
whatever. It's not going to be like, oh, they drank and would get intoxicated 2 or 3 nights a week when we were together, so now no parenting time for them.
Right.
Which is kind of what people expect. Or like the abuse,
Mhm.
it's like, the court tends to look at physical abuse much differently than they do verbal and emotional abuse.
Yeah.
Because verbal and emotional abuse is somewhat subjective, right?
Right.
Because we're all different personalities and we
Right.
all interact in different ways.
And guess what? People fight.
People argue.
People fight.
Who was it that said to us something like, I don't know where this quote comes from at all, but it's like, Mary Poppins doesn't marry Dr. Jekyll.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of thing. I don't know if those
Mother
were
Teresa doesn't marry Attila the Hun.
Yeah, okay. I was saying, it was that kind of, I couldn't remember even who
That's
the
kind
people
of an aphorism from family law that
Yeah.
everybody says. If in other words, you see this person that you're trying to make into this horrible person.
Right.
Well, wait a minute. If they're horrible, why are you with them?
Right. Right.
Maybe you're a horrible person too, right?
Yeah, and not to say that one person doesn't a lot of times have more extreme behavior, or they have mental illness, or they have, or they do have alcoholism or some struggle or something going on. But it's not usually that you're over here 100% guilt-free with your little halo on. It's not that extreme.
Right.
And so you've got your own part in this dance, so to speak, and the court, tries to consider the big picture of all of that, of
Right.
what's going on.
So you've got 8 months until that custody hearing. Maybe you should do something different. And here's the thing: if your ex-wife or your ex-husband is an unrecovered alcoholic, they're going to screw up.
Right.
They're going to screw up. That's what alcoholics do. They don't show up for work. They don't show up for transitions. They shirk their responsibilities because they love the bottle. They love the alcohol more than they love, their job or their child or whatever.
Yeah, and that's a fear-driven thing. It's like I'm afraid of all these what if. It's us running all these what if scenarios in our mind and being afraid that A, B, or C are going to happen at the end of the day, when likelihood they're not. I talked to somebody the other day who essentially, I'm not an attorney and it wasn't any kind of legal analysis, obviously, because I can't do that. But just from everything she was telling me, it was like she had so many things working in her favor in her custody case, and her ex really had not been very involved with the child,
Mm-hmm.
only seen them a handful of times over the course of their life, and they were older than 10, I'll say it that way. And it was just like, and this person has an attorney, okay, but she contacted me about my coaching services and to help her deal with some of her own behaviors and way of dealing with the other person and whatnot. But the interesting thing was, it was kind of like, well, like you have all these things working in your favor, and really what's driving your anxiety is just your fear of what the outcome is going to be. And so part of it is just learning to kind of sit with that fear, maybe, for lack of a better, or
because it's hard to play the long game if you're having fear that something horrible is going to happen.
Right. And also having that understanding that it's the things that you fear are not likely to happen, and you can't succeed in the long term if you're letting those fears stop you. It's like, I'll liken it to like our business. So, over the years, we've had different times where, you have seasons in your business, and sometimes things are really, really prosperous, and sometimes it's more of a struggle. The beginning years tend to be more of a struggle. But when the lean times would come in the beginning and the bank account would get very, very low, if we let that fear freeze us to where we can't do work or can't perform or can't fulfill our obligations, then it stops the whole flow. Yeah. And then you end up with no money, right? You're broke. But if you can go, okay, well, it's a little lean right now, I don't have a ton of work, whatever, but I'm going to throw myself in, and I'm going to service the clients I have to the utmost of my ability, and I'm going to work on my marketing and do all these things, and you stay in action, then that decreases your fear, and it also increases your chances
Right.
of a good outcome.
Go back and look for about maybe 4 or 5 weeks ago. We did an episode called Stop Imagining.
Yeah.
And that's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Stop imagining the worst and start imagining the best. But I want to go back to something.
Okay.
Okay. So we've got 8 months, and your strategy has been Pickett's charge so far. It's been,
right.
Give it to him with both barrels. And you got
right.
this aggressive law firm, and the court's not giving you what you want.
Right.
It's something we see frequently. So we're going to change our strategy. There's a difference between strategy and tactics.
Right.
Tactics is the short term. You're basically, what is the right discovery device, or what is the right type of hearing to request, or that. But your overall strategy needs to change. And here's the problem. Getting back to the Till of the Hun, Mother Teresa comment, if that's your case, and it frequently is that both of you are basically being a Till of the Hun.
Right.
And you can recognize that. Stop doing it.
Right.
Stop doing it now and start being nice. We have seen this work over and over and over again. Because if both of you are attacking each other, the court kind of says, pox on both their houses. I really can't decide. One of you people has to stop doing this. But if you stop, suddenly you're nice, and he's kind of going, okay, I don't know. She's behaving a lot differently. I don't understand what's going on. What's up her sleeve? That's kind of what you want him to be thinking, or her.
Yeah, it throws the other person off because they can't figure out what's happening.
So what that other person will do is they will do the Russian thing. They'll get all of their biggest guns and put them on the line and fire them all at once and have this huge barrage, right? Hoping that you'll succumb.
Yes.
And you've got to give ground and just kind of be nice and try to find the silver lining in everything they say and be all positive, and it'll drive them nuts, for one thing.
Yeah. So I see this a lot in my coaching stuff, because a big piece, I would say, of what people often need help with over the long term is the behavior side of it. You might have a court hearing coming up or different things right now, but really the behavior side is what you really have to try to manage long term for your ultimate success. I think that's the biggest factor.
Right.
And what happens is you'll start helping people modify their communication, and and then what happens is inevitably the other party, my client will call and say, I'm getting quadruple the amount of messages I was getting before. And I'm like, of course you are. Because before, what they were sending was working. They were getting a rise out of you. Right. Now they're not, so they can't figure out what. So they're like, okay, I'm not putting enough bullets out. Let me fire some more.
They increase the brutality of their attack.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you have to hold the line. I always tell people, you have to hold that line, because you will get through to the other side and it will markedly decrease. And I've seen this happen hundreds of cases. I mean, people don't really believe that it's possible, believe that it will happen, but I'm telling you, hundreds of cases, in the most extreme cases, I've seen this strategy work.
But you have to be willing to acknowledge that your prior strategy wasn't working.
Right.
And then shift to a new strategy, which is why, because you're in command over your case,
right,
you have the authority to change strategies. And I would say that most attorneys don't ask your attorney about this.
They don't get into this part of it.
Right.
Into the personal behavior strategies, they don't. They don't analyze that. And yet, if you go to court and you watch court, or you log on or whatever you do and you observe court, watch, especially when they have to make it's a trial or something major, or it's a motion that is fairly lengthy where there's a lot of discussion. A lot of times the court will give their thoughts about the reason why they're doing it. And I'm telling you, 99 times out of 100, there is something in there about the one or both of the parties' behaviors.
Right, right.
And that's the part that the attorneys really don't focus on, which is
Right.
bizarre to me because it's a big piece of winning
Right.
the game. And did you have something else you were going to say or
No.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I have all kinds of stuff to say, but
You're waiting.
I'm waiting for you. Go.
Well,
Go.
one of the things I was going to say is I had a client send me an email that she was going to send to her ex.
Yeah.
And it had like 4 paragraphs in it. And this is somebody I've been working with for just a couple months, not too awful long. And she said, is this okay to send or should I revise it? I sent her back my revision and I literally had 2 lines, like, 2 very short
You whittled
sentences.
down like 2 pages of blah, blah,
like
blah into
it was
2
4
lines.
paragraphs.
Yeah.
And I whittled it down to 2 lines. And she wrote back and she said, oh my goodness, you just totally like took that down to nothing. You just like carved it up. And she said, I get it. I get, I really like this client because she's just really all about trying to learn and, not thinking that, oh, well, I know how he is and I know what to do and I know da 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 da. It's like, okay,
Right.
like let me learn,
I already know his death to creativity.
Right. Or learning or
learning new
growing.
things. Right.
Yeah.
I already know.
Yeah.
I know what he's going to do. I know what's going to happen.
That's what your teenager says to you. If you have a 17, 18, 19-year-old, that's just their most common. I know. They're always telling you that.
Right.
And that's because they
true.
think they have it all figured out, And so it's really great when you have a client that really, is
Right.
trying to learn these strategies.
Right. So here's what you have to do. And instead of thinking you know what's best for
Right.
everything, try to figure out what the court's concerns are.
Right.
They give you a lot of clues.
They do.
You have to listen carefully to what they're saying and make notes.
Right.
If they are heavily critical of one parent's cooperation, you know that it's cooperation. I was watching one case. It was Wednesday when I was getting ready for my hearing to be held, and they were struggling over a parenting plan, and there was, in this case, a safety issue and so forth. And what the case came down to is essentially the stage of development that the child was in, because she didn't want to give him any supervised visits. And she wanted no contact, and the court said, well, that's just not good for this child because she's
young.
Little. She's only 1 year old.
Right.
She needs she needs frequent contact.
Right.
They're not going to, for example, the court's not going to oppose or grant a move away to a father for a child that's still nursing.
Right.
Yeah. It's because in that case, the focus of the court's concern is not the parents' support of each other. It's the development of the child. And they'll give this away if you listen to them.
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of times, I mean, if you're self-representing in particular, a lot of times if you just ask, I've seen Thomas on several occasions, kind of at the end of the hearing, if the judge didn't really give enough clues, he'll say, well, Your Honor, can I ask what is the court's concern?
Right.
Or if it's a new case he's coming into and he doesn't really have his head fully around it yet or whatever, because there's some, you're called on the eve of a hearing.
That's an excellent question.
Yeah. Is Your Honor, what are the court's concerns? And then once you can address it.
Right.
Like we had a client a few years ago that was a severe alcoholic, had lost their, their license in their business and all these different consequences from being this really severe alcoholic. But what that person did is they did everything the court wanted them to do. They got into a program. They went to AA. They had a sponsor. They tracked everything, and they got themselves rehabilitated enough that their business issue their licensing issue was reinstated.
Mm-hmm.
And
I know who you're talking about now.
Yeah. And I don't want to give too much detail, but anyway, the licensing was reinstated and all this stuff, and so then that person eventually was able to go back to court, and I think within like 3 years or so had 50-50 custody with the other parent because they addressed what the court's concern was. The court's concern is the drinking. Okay. Right. How do I address that? Right. So whatever the issue, and I use that because that's kind of an obvious example. It's more black and white than some of them. but you have to understand what the court's concern is. Otherwise, you're just continuing to throw stuff up that that may not even be what they're worried about.
Right. So in a good way to summarize this might be to say, if you don't like the way things are going in your case, and a lot of people don't, call an audible. Call an audible. Look at the defense. Look at what the situation is, what the decision makers really care about in your case, and change the strategy. And a lot of times, it's hard to see that without a coach.
Yeah.
It's hard to see that because you're inside your own body, having all these emotions, and you're angry because the court can't see what's going on.
Right.
And it's like you want to stamp your feet and say, can't you understand why he's such a jerk or whatever? And instead, you got to step back and you look at the battlefield and you go, is my current strategy working?
Right.
And if it's not, you got to change it.
Right. Or let's say mom's, let's say dad's saying she's alienating,
Yeah.
but he can't seem to get any time or leverage out of that. Well, then maybe the court's not believing that she's alienating and you need to switch tactics.
Correct.
So, okay. Well, we hope that was helpful. If you're listening to the podcast on Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, wherever you're listening to us, iTunes, don't forget to rate and review us, and also hit subscribe so you're notified as new episodes come out each week. And if you're watching,
and they do come out each week.
They do, pretty much. I think we've missed one in the 3 years.
No, we haven't missed any.
I think we did one. I think there was 1 week. I think when one of my grandbabies was born. Anyway, we digress. If you're watching us on YouTube, don't forget to hit like and subscribe so you get notified as new videos come out each week. And thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Divorce University online podcast with your hosts, Thomas and Tammy Ferreira. For more information, visit www.divorceuniversityonline.com.